Welcome to this training session. Today, we will discuss and learn about the decision-making process in building renovation projects and the proposed BIM-SPEED decision-making support methodology. The proposed methodology supports the selection of suitable renovation solutions in the context of residential buildings. It proposes a structured procedure to guide the stakeholders through the decision-making process, defining criteria, capturing preferences, and establishing a final ranking of the different renovation alternatives. The methodology relies on an Excel spreadsheet that implements the Pairwise Comparison method to capture the preferences of different stakeholders and the Topsys Method to obtain the final ranking. The main use case of the proposed BIM-SPEED decision support methodology is to perform the decision-making process in renovation projects in a structured way. The framework supports the stakeholders to define objectives and criteria covering environmental, social, and economic aspects. It also supports the engagement of different stakeholders and the capture of their preferences, identifying the alternative that perform the better, and gathering and presenting different results from multiple analyses. This to make the final decision in a more informed and transparent way. The end users of the methodology are owners, investors, architects, building managers, and other stakeholders who usually should lead the decision-making process in the context of building renovation projects. The presentation includes two main sections. In the first section, I'm going to present to you the Excel spreadsheet that can guide you through the implementation of the BIM-SPEED decision-making methodology. In the second section, I will present some additional recommendations and some final comments regarding the implementation of the methodology. The goal of the proposed methodology is to support the stakeholders to deal with some of the particularities mentioned previously. To do this, we develop an Excel tool that guides the stakeholders through the decision-making process to define clear goals, capture the preferences of different stakeholders groups, and quantify the performance of different renovation alternatives. The tool is designed to support the stakeholders through the process to select a suitable renovation solution. The users should follow six steps. The first three steps correspond to the descriptive stage, where the stakeholders should make a general description of the project. Then the user should define the potential renovation alternative they would like to evaluate. In the third step, the different stakeholders should discuss and define the criteria that will be used to evaluate the alternative that were previously defined. The quantification stage includes steps 4 and 5. In step 4, the tool allows the different groups of stakeholders to enter their preferences according to the criteria that were established in the previous step. The Excel tool calculates the criteria weights according to the input of the users. In step 5, the performance of the alternatives according to each criterion should be quantified. At the last stage, the tool combines the results for the criteria quantification and the preferences of the stakeholders to rank the alternative and identify which are the alternatives that perform the better on the criteria. And at the same time, capture the preferences of the different stakeholders. Now, I will introduce to you the Excel tool and give you an overview of these steps and the functionalities of the spreadsheet. In the first tab, you will find an introduction and a short description of each of the steps that you should follow during the decision-making process in your renovation project. First, you should provide a description of the project and your goals. Second, you should
Describe the alternative that you would like to evaluate during the process. In the third step, you should select and define the criteria that are relevant for you and relevant for other stakeholders involved in the process. In step 4, each of the stakeholders groups should perform the pairwise comparison to capture their preferences on the criteria and to quantify the weights of each criterion according to those preferences. In step 5, you should enter the results of the criteria quantification for all the alternatives that are being evaluated. In the final step, you will visualize the final ranking and you will be able to analyze the different alternatives according to the criteria and the preferences you captured in the previous steps. In the project tab, you can perform the first step. You can describe the project and the stakeholders involved in the process. In this illustrative example, there are 3 stakeholders groups, but only the owner can vote and has the right to make the final decision. In this tab, you can also perform the step 2 and describe the alternative that you will evaluate as part of the process. In step 3, you can adjust the criteria according to your requirements. You can remove objective and remove criteria that are not relevant for your case. Once the final criteria tree that will be used for the evaluations is defined, each of the stakeholders groups should perform the pairwise comparison. To do this, there are dedicated tabs for each of the stakeholders. They can perform the pairwise comparisons individually. Here you can use the filter option of Excel to visualize only the comparisons that are applicable for your case. And with the slide bars, each of the stakeholders can enter its preferences on the criteria. Once each stakeholder has performed the pairwise comparison, the results are summarized in the pairwise comparison summary tab. These results will be used to compute the weights for each of the criterion. If you are interested on the internal calculations, you can check the internal tabs where the weight matrices are built and the calculations are made. But you will visualize the final criteria weights on the criteria weight summary. So here for each of the stakeholders groups, you will find the results and you can compare the preferences on each of the levels of the criteria tree. Once this step 4 is performed, you should perform the step 5 and quantify the criteria for all the alternatives and enter the results in the dedicated tab to this goal. Once you enter the criteria calculations here, the final ranking is computed automatically. Here in the final ranking tab, you can perform the last step of the decision-making process. So you can analyze the aggregated final weights for each of the criterion. You can analyze the different results for the alternative and you will find the final ranking. The alternatives that are located in the left side of the ranking are the alternatives that perform the best according to the criteria you define and the preferences you capture through the pairwise comparisons.
That was a brief introduction of the methodology. At the end of the presentation, we will provide you with some useful links with more detailed information. Now, in this third section, I would like to present to you some general strategies that can help you during the decision-making process. One of the main steps in the decision-making process is to define the objective of the renovation. They are the starting point to identify criteria and characteristics of the alternative. This stage can benefit from the diagnostic techniques, technical inspections, thermal scanning, inhabitants questionnaires, among other strategies to identify potential problems that should be addressed through the renovation project. Moreover, you can conduct workshops with the different stakeholders and encourage the discussion around wish lists, existing issues, their expectations, and how could a suitable renovation alternative look like. While designing the alternative, the architect, designer, or owner should apply an open approach. This is exploring a broad space of technologies, devices, and parameters. A constraint-free approach should be also suitable to analyze general alternatives and then narrow them to define more specific options. Some other strategies include focusing in one specific objective at a time and generating alternatives that could have a high performance in fulfilling that specific goal. Once multiple alternatives are generated with this approach, stakeholders should seek for possible combinations and diversification of those alternatives. Moreover, there are other alternatives that might be relevant for the analysis, such as a non-renovation scenario, which analyzes the case when no renovation is performed. A criterion is a scale or measure used to indicate the degree to which a specific objective is achieved by each of the proposed renovation alternatives. While defining the criteria, the preferences and perspectives of the different stakeholders groups involved in the renovation project should be included. Including diverse stakeholders groups in the process encourages them to engage on the renovation, improving the scope of the project and facilitating the fulfillment of regulation requirements. Questionnaires and workshops can help on this task. While defining the criteria, it is important to notice that they should be complete, minimal, and not redundant to facilitate the analysis in the following steps. In case multiple stakeholders take part directly on the decision-making process, it should be defined how they will participate. Do they have the right to vote? Are they only informed during the process? Do they participate as advisors? The BIM-SPEED decision tool allows two different consensus approaches. In case multiple stakeholders have the right to vote, their preferences are captured on the Excel tool and the criteria weights for each of the groups is calculated and gathered together to compute the final criteria weights that reflect the importance of the criteria according to the perspective of all the groups. Nevertheless, there are some specific cases where the main decision maker would be interested in capturing the preferences from other stakeholders that don't have the right to vote or take part as advisors in the process. The preferences from those stakeholders can support the main decision maker to make better informed decisions. In these cases, the preferences of these additional stakeholders are captured through the pairwise comparisons as well, and the criteria weights for each stakeholder group can also be computed. Nevertheless, these weights are calculated and displayed only to support the analysis of the main decision maker. The weights obtained for these stakeholders groups are not integrated in the calculations for the final ranking. The tool only considers the preferences of the main stakeholders with the right to vote on the final decision. Regarding the method to obtain the final ranking, we would like to give you an overview of the Topsys method, which allows organizing the renovation alternative according to their performance. This method was selected because of its simplicity. It takes the set of multiple renovation options and compares them with the best and worst possible renovation alternative. The best possible solution is the fictional solution that performs the best in all the criteria. For instance, in the case of two criteria, the distance to the best ideal and the negative solution is measured. The renovation alternatives closer to the best ideal solutions are ranked in the first positions of the final ranking. To summarize, the BIM-SPEED decision support methodology offers an structured approach to conduct the decision-making process to select the final renovation solution. It captures preferences, ranks the alternatives in a transparent way, and covers different aspects. The methodology is based on an intuitive Excel spreadsheet, easy to understand and to work with. For more detailed information, you can find a technical report describing the tool and how to use it in our website, and you can download the tool directly from the Deposit Once repository of the Technical University of Berlin. And you can also check the BIM-SPEED YouTube channel to watch a short introductory video of the tool. Thank you so much for your attention. This is the end of the training material.